So as we kind of launch into the new year, last week we talked a little bit about living an intentional life, okay? So we talked a little bit about how it is normal in life, and especially here in Summit County, to kind of float along and go wherever the current takes you, right? I mean, honestly, it kind of is the mantra. I would say maybe a core value of Summit County is like, I don't know, bro, whatever's happening, it's happening. And so we talked about living an actual life of intentionality where we're reflecting on our last year and seeing what God had for us, how we grew, maybe ways that we got taken off track a little bit or something that we would like to pull back on course. Looked at those 5 capitals: spiritual capital, intellectual capital, physical capital, financial capital, and relational capital. And how we evaluate those things, how we grow in those things, how we invest our time and energy into those things, and then how we give them away, right? So our whole lives need to be about building all those capitals while also giving it away all the time. So it's a really easy way. In fact, it's helped us to look at those capitals when there have been times that we would say now. For example, we went on a vacation this summer that we sorely needed. I cannot tell you how badly we needed it. And as we were talking about the cost of it, Eric and I, and just the trouble, with finding childcare and stuff like that, we looked at it in terms of capital. It is worth financial capital to receive some relational capital, because you and I need some time together away from these wonderful blessings of children that we've been given, but we kind of need, somebody to go away and us to just, so we invested in relational capital. It cost us financial, but it was worth it, right? So I find that sometimes it's helpful to be able to be like, I am giving up some time here. I am sitting all afternoon giving physical capital, my time, to someone who really needs a listening ear so that I can give back spiritual capital. Now, if I don't see it in that way of transaction, in that sense, I'll just think it's costing me something and not realizing what I'm gaining, right? So it is helpful sometimes to say, and I give this up so I can receive this. And of course, spiritual capital is the one that Jesus continually says again and again and again. If you have to give up all the others, give them up to gain that, right? Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else will be added. So all the other capitals will come into line. I mean, we kind of have to be smart with stuff, here and there. But if we are really seeking his kingdom, then it's going to kind of all fall into place. So that's what we talked about, is reflecting on this last year and heading into this new year with intentionality. And I'm going to tell you that the idea of intentionality goes against the grain in a lot of places, and certainly here, where I don't know how many times I've heard Summit County called a sabbatical from real life, but that really, literally have heard that. We've come to just describe it that way. A place where you drive into from any direction and see the sign Colorado's Playground just kind of attests to a sabbatical from real life. So why would anybody have goals? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is just a time where we're playing. I'm sure I'll have to get back to real life one day. When the reality is we lose years like that. One day we can wake up and have lost decades. So we want to make sure that as God is setting our course, we are right in line with him, and that means being intentional. This week I want to talk a little bit about dreaming. Okay? So this last week I did this thing called Strength Finders, which I've never done, but my sister, my twin sister, who some of you guys met last week, is a certified coach, and so she's like, you really need to do this. She was curious how we would line up differently, which was interesting. Most of it, we were pretty close. And I won't tell you what my top ones were, but I will tell you out of 34 attributes, most of you can probably guess which my top ones are. I do not find that I'm a very mysterious person. Sometimes I'm like, man, everybody who meets me has got me figured out in about 5 minutes. But you probably know like what I score top in. But one of my top ones, I think it was like number 6, is something called futuristic. And they have little videos and like little things. And this is out of 34 different things, okay? So number 6 was futuristic. Now my earlier ones were strategic and activator, the things that you know about me, right? Futuristic seemed to be this idea that anything is possible. And I want to see kind of what it could look like in my brain before we get there. And I want to sit around and imagine what are the possibilities in this particular situation or with this particular person's life, or crazy, crazy gifts. It is not necessarily even based on the past, although I will never say that we have a blank slate as we start a year, right? There is no such thing once we've lived life as a blank slate. Everything that we are is because of kind of what we've done. That's literally kind of what character means. The results, the outgrowth of the choices we have made leading up to that point. However, I guess in this futurist kind of mentality, I mean, really, this year could be anything. It could. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything like last year. It could be a complete 180 turnaround. It doesn't have to be built on anything God did. It doesn't. I mean, that's really the way I think. God, what could you possibly have? Now, I know that there are things that he kind of lays down as foundations that kind of make sense, and my number one was strategic. So I'm usually looking at the strategy and the plays and all these things, but to just imagine and dream of a future, I think God enjoys that. Because sometimes we can get so bogged down in what's possible in our own minds that we forget to think, we're talking about God. And God can do anything. This is what we're going to talk about tonight, dreaming a little. Stretching our brains and our spirits and our imaginations to think what God could have for you this year. And obviously, every year builds on the next, right? 2015 is gone. We will never get it back. We will never get those hours and those days and those minutes. We will never get those opportunities to make those choices. We will never have those opportunities to worship again. We will never have those opportunities to share Christ with someone again. We will never have those opportunities to stand on behalf of the oppressed or to give or to act with courage. We will never have those opportunities again. They're gone. This year, we can do anything. We can just say, Because, I'm also pretty evaluative, and so I look at my life and I'm like, I could have done that a little better. I would have done that a little differently if I had the chance. Well, guess what? I do. I have 2016. So this is the point where we get to dream and say, it's not about perfection. It's about growth. It's about imagining what God can do. Now, I'm not going to imagine what I can do, because that's pretty depressing. Because honestly, there's not much that I can do with my limited competencies and abilities and faith and all that stuff. It's only what God can do that we want to put our focus on. I don't know, how many of you guys ever saw the movie The Pursuit of Happiness? Raise it up high. Okay. So it really is based on a true story about a man named Chris Gardner. Now, it frustrated me because it truly is the pursuit. I mean, the entire movie, the man is pursuing happiness, and then you get like a minute and 32 seconds at the end where he's happy. But that's kind of the point of the movie, I guess. I mean, at the end I was like, really? He's happy, and now it's over. It was kind of a bummer, but that's the point, is the pursuit of happiness is the pain and the perseverance. We look at this man's life. I mean, I read some of his biography, and honestly, he had it pretty rough. I mean, that was an accurate portrayal of this man who was homeless with this 5-year-old son that his mother had kind of been with, but then kind of dropped him off and then went somewhere else. And he was like trying to not only survive, but make things imaginative and beautiful. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen it's an Italian movie with English subtitles called Life is Beautiful, where a man is in a concentration camp trying to make it all a game for his son the whole time. It is an unbelievable masterpiece of a movie. Go look it up and find it. The whole time his son thinks it's a game because his father is so good at making his life joyful, even in the midst of this concentration camp. And that's kind of the imagery that I get with this movie. He's trying to make life good for his son. Not scary, not uncertain, even though everything around him is scary and uncertain. He ends up, at the very end of the movie, he gets a job as a broker at E.F. Hutton, but after that starts his own firm, sells out of it years later as a millionaire. This man who was homeless and single dad and this whole thing. And the whole idea is this man dreamed of what he could be, and he didn't stop till he got there. And so you can see sometimes his hope just hanging on by a thread. There's one scene where he takes his son into a subway, like an underground station bathroom, locks the door, and that's where they spend the night. And he's just sobbing. Like, this is my life. And then you see where it ends up at the end. And it's crazy when you think about it. This is a true story. Stories like that happen all the time. And it's not because one person is more talented or better than another. It's because one person decides, I'm going to make this happen. And another person says, I guess it ain't happening for me, and gives up. That's the difference. One person knows how to dream, to say, I could start my own firm. I mean, who thinks like that? I have a really great, cozy life here, but I could risk it all and go do that, and it pays off big, right? Everybody who's ever had anything that paid off big risked a lot. Everything, usually. And that's actually what we're going to talk about next week, is failure, because that's usually after we dream, then we need to see the part that failure plays, because if we're not comfortable with that, we're really never going to get anywhere big. Now, when we have a dream that God gives us, it's a whole lot more powerful, because we can really count on the fact that he's not going to stop until he sees it accomplished. Now, he might use someone else if we're not willing to step into it, but he will see it happen. And so the biggest dreamer, the best dreamer that I can think of in the Bible that we see is Joseph. So I'm just going to look at Joseph's story, just a sliver. It covers about 20 chapters in Genesis, at the end of Genesis, but we'll just look at one, Genesis 37, where it kind of all starts. So we are going to start reading at verse 1. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Okay, so Jacob had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, sisters. They did not have a very good relationship with one another, and they were pretty much in this warfare about who could have more sons. And it wasn't working out well for Rachel, so she loaned him her, servant girl to have a few, and then her sister did the same when she stopped having kids. And there's this big war, and there's 12 tribes of Israel. They come from Jacob, and they're from all these different mothers. So he has a bunch of half-brothers, and he goes and follows them around and tattles on them, okay? The 17-year-old boy must have been a joy to be with. He goes back and reports to his father everything that they're doing that's bad, which I think from the stories was a lot, okay? So this is the backstory. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age and to Rachel, who he loved. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about him, they hated him more than ever. "Listen to this dream," he said. "We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine." His brothers responded, "So you think you'll be our king, do you? Do you actually think you'll reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Okay, so let's be real here for a second. It's not just that Joseph was like this wonderful little kid, like he let them know that he had had these dreams where they will be subservient to him in some way, and they hated him because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. He is not endearing himself to them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. "Listen, I've had another dream," he said. "The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me." This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. "What kind of a dream is that?" he asked. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you?" But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready and I will send you to them." "I'm ready to go," Joseph replied. "Go and see how your brothers and flocks are getting along. Then come back and bring me a report." Okay, so this is like his little job. Bring me a report of all the things they're doing wrong. So Joseph sent him on his way, and Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph arrived to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph replied. "Do you know where they are pasturing their sheep?" "Yes," the man told him. "They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, 'Let's go on to Dothan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. So they're very far from their home. They can get up to all sorts of mischief out here, and they come up with a plan. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. That's his little nickname. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." They're like, But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. "Let's not kill him," he said. "Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him." Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. You know why? Reuben had done a naughty thing, and he had slept with his father's mistress. Okay, this is a messed up family, all right? Now, Jacob's getting deceived all sorts of ways, which is kind of appropriate since he was the deceiver, okay? He deceived everybody in his life, the father, the old guy. Joseph's mother is not much better in how she treats everybody around him. His grandfather, Laban, was a tool. I mean, like, you look at this guy's lineage. I love how in the Old Testament, nobody's perfect. I mean, sometimes you look at them like, for real. you're going to tell people that Sarah's your sister again so they don't attack you, and I'm pretty sure she might have to sleep with somebody because, I mean, like sometimes you like Abraham, you just look at him like, what are you doing? It's nice kind of because we're flawed, and so it's nice to be able to look at other flawed people that God used, but seriously, he slept with his father's, and so he was out of favor with his father, and so he's thinking, here's my way to get back in good. If I rescue Joseph, then bring him back to my father, I'll be okay again. So he's all about not laying a hand on him. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There's no water in it. Then just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain by killing our brother? We'd have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to these Ishmaelite traders. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, came by, and interestingly, Ishmael was who? Isaac's half-brother. So you have all this weird family history. You know, you've got these people who are like buying and selling. I mean, you've got this mixture of like God's people and these other people, and it's just interesting imagery, the whole thing. So sell him to this other people who are really kind of our relatives. They took him to Egypt. So sometime later, Reuben returned to Joseph to get Joseph out of the cistern. When he discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in grief. Obviously, he's very concerned about his brother. No. Then he went back to his brothers and lamented, the boy is gone. What will I do now? He's like, crap, that was my plan to get good again. Oh yeah, and Joseph, he could be dead. Who knows? He wasn't too concerned about his brother. Then the brothers killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message. Look what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? Not our brother, your son. Their father recognized it immediately. Yes, he said, it is my son's robe. A wild animal must have eaten him. Joseph has clearly been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes and dressed himself in burlap, which was the way they mourned. He mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. I will go to my grave mourning for my son, he would say, and then he would weep. Meanwhile, the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. And then what happens after this is he's sold to Potiphar. He kind of works his way up, becomes a really big hotshot in Potiphar's house. And then Potiphar's wife thinks Joseph is really good looking, much more than her husband, who's probably much, much older, and decides to kind of like, hey, you and me, we could do this thing and nobody would ever know. And Joseph says, no, I could never be with you. You're my master's wife. That's not right. And so she makes up this whole story about how he tries to rape her so that he gets in trouble for rejecting her. Sexual advances, and he gets thrown into prison. Now, I don't know about you, but this dream thing that he's had is not working out so well. Like, how is any of this factoring into this dream that this boy had? So far, not a single thing has gone his way. In fact, his life has gotten worse since he had these dreams, right? Should have just gone back to before he had the dreams. He would have been happy, secure, all that. Well, eventually his dream does come true. In Genesis 42:6. Many chapters later, since Joseph was governor of all of Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came. When they arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. So we do see the fulfillment of the dream that Joseph had years later. This is after he's thrown into prison because of a false accusation, after he's forgotten by some people that he did good things for. He interpreted their dreams and they went off and forgot him. And then finally one day Pharaoh has this dream and they're like, wait a second, hold on. This guy really helped us out when we were in prison. Well, the one guy, because the other guy was dead by then, which was the fulfillment of his dream. And we should go find him because he kind of knows what he's talking about. And then Joseph comes, interprets this dream for Pharaoh, which ends up saving not only the entire nation of Egypt, but many other people, his own people included, because he says, hey, what your dream means is that there's going to be 7 years of plenty. Don't eat it all, because after that it's going to be 7 years of famine where you won't have anything. So store bits of it away. And then not only can you provide for your people in those 7 years, which nobody could see coming, right? But you can also help all these other nations. You can charge them 4 times more and make a bunch of money, you know, like he's the businessman. So he saves all these people and helps his nation and is wonderful, powerful, great person. When he goes to work for Pharaoh, he's much higher up than he ever was even for Potiphar, right? Potiphar was just an officer in Pharaoh's court, but Pharaoh was the king. And so we see this whole progression happen where Joseph kind of goes down, 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 and then zip, straight up to the top. And that's where his dream becomes fulfilled. So there's a couple things that we learn from Joseph about dreams. And these are the things that I want you to learn tonight. And I really encourage you to read the story. Like I said, it starts at 37. It goes till basically the end of Genesis when we, get to the point where the new Pharaoh had forgotten Joseph's people. And then, 400 years goes by and the people are in slavery eventually. And then Moses gets raised up. So it's a really cool kind of transition into Exodus. And then if you're reading through the Bible, you might want to skip a couple of those books and just come back to them. Just don't tell anybody I told you that. But don't get bogged down in Leviticus in February and never read the Bible again, okay? I'm just asking, please. Skip them and come back, okay? So many people, it's just tragedy, casualties of reading through the one-year Bibles. I don't know how to say. Like, please, just read some New Testament for a few minutes and go back. So some of the things that we learn from Joseph about his dreams. The first one is this. The fulfillment of the dream comes in God's timing, not ours. Do you know how long it was between Joseph's dream and when it was fulfilled? Anybody know or want to take a guess? 13 years. 13 years, over a decade. Now, I'm 36. So if I had a dream right now that I was just itching to see fulfilled, and I had to wait 13 years, I'd be super old, right? I'd be almost 50 by the time that thing came to pass. Now take that to a teenager's life. That's double his life almost. That's a long, stinking time to wait. We're not talking about 6 months here and 2 months there. We're talking about year after year after year after year. Joseph did not see anything close to the fulfillment of this dream. Now, why? Why did God wait so long? Because during that time, Joseph changed, first of all. Joseph changed, and he grew. 1 Peter 1:7 says this. Peter is writing to the church. He says, "These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world." Trials show that our faith is genuine. Now, for people who are going through trials, this isn't always a super great encouragement, but it still is the truth. Fire is required for gold to come into its most pure, beautiful, valuable state. I don't think it probably feels great to the gold to go through fire. But when it comes out, it's tested, it's pure, it's ready for anything. You know what I'm saying? And that's what was happening to Joseph. He wasn't a punk 17-year-old boy when he emerged onto the scene with Pharaoh. He was a guy who had been mistreated and misrepresented and falsely accused and hurt. And I don't see him a single time getting mad at God or saying, "But you promised." Oh, God, I'm supposed to be somebody awesome. Why aren't I great by now? I'm supposed to be doing something amazing. So we've had these conversations. We had these conversations with all the interns this summer, with every young person that we come around. I don't know. It seems to floor them when I just look at them and say, "Who told you you were going to be great?" And they're like, jaw hits the ground. "Well, I don't know. Isn't that what people Yeah, somebody told you your entire youth group life that you were going to be somebody awesome and great and you're going to go change the world. Well, guess what? You might have to get thrown into prison and be nobody for a stinking long time and be crushed for a while and be purified through fire. And until that happens, I'm not all that interested with how great you are. Maybe that's my activator coming out or my command. That's number 3, right? But seriously, prove to me you can put up with some crap and still be refined, and then we'll talk. Because I don't see Joseph being great at 17. I mean, it's easy to get a dream, right? Anybody can have a good dream. I'd have a dream for my life too. Preach to the nations. That's like every prophecy over every kid at every church camp there's ever been on the face of the planet. I want to just go to people and say, who hasn't been prophesied over that you're going to preach to the nations? What does that mean, Rochelle? What does it mean? Reinhard Bonnke does that. Nobody else does that. What is it? Anyway, sometimes I just want to take people and shake them and say, what are you promising these people? This is the call is to give up everything. The call is to be crucified daily. The call is to lay down our life and our preferences and our comfort and our convenience and our lives. You know what I'm saying? That's what Joseph knew. Unbelievable how he got through all of that. Joseph changed in 13 years for the better. And I think God might have been kind of waiting on that. Also, his brothers changed. You know, the way they respond in the later chapters, I don't have time to tell the whole story, but he has a younger son, Benjamin, who was Rachel's other son, who was also highly prized to his father, and his father showed him tons of favoritism, just like he did Joseph. And along the way, Joseph throws out these little things when he's testing his brothers. They don't know that he's him. And at one point, he gives Benjamin, I want to say it's like 5 times the amount of food as everybody else. I think he's just testing them to see how they will respond to favoritism of him. And they're different. They have changed. I mean, at one point, he says, I'm going to hold this kid back as a slave because of this trick he played on him. I mean, there's deception like all through this family. And Reuben says, take me instead. Now, this is the guy who was only concerned for himself. And now he's like, I will be your slave, but I cannot have my father's heart broken over him losing another son. He actually cared. His brothers had changed in 13 years. That was good. Now, if I were Joseph, I would have thought, they'll never change. And sometimes there are people in my life that I feel like, they're never going to change. But it's not true. Over time, people do. Sometimes, right? And world events changed. So part of it was God not giving a hoot about what was happening with Joseph. I mean, let's be real. Joseph is one little punk kid, okay, who happens to be not having a great day when he's sitting in prison. But God is lining up rulers of nations, right? He's getting the weather patterns set up for a famine in 7 years. I mean, he's got other things to think about than just Joseph and his comfort. Now, sometimes we have a hard time wrapping our heads around that. God actually has a plan that's bigger than just me. And so if he gives me a dream and he decides to delay it for 13 years, maybe it's not just about me and my happiness. It might be about a whole lot of other stuff that's got to come together to save millions of people's lives. Because that's what he did through this. Isaiah 55:9, God says this, for just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. And it is so interesting that we need reminders of that, right? That we need to be reminded that God is not us. And his ways aren't our ways, and his thoughts are higher than ours. And he just doesn't think about the same stuff we think about. He's got a lot of other stuff to work out. And so he waited, and it happened in his timing. Thank goodness Joseph cooperated with him. And then the second thing we learn about dreams is that even the detours have purpose. Even the detours. Now think about it. Joseph gets this dream, and then everything goes wrong for years and years and years and years. For almost the equivalent of the amount of time he's been alive, he is mistreated. He has lived with favor. I mean, he's most likely kind of spoiled, I'm going to guess. I mean, he's got favor coming out of his ears for no good reason except that his dad loved his mother a lot. You know, there's nothing that shows us character. I'm sure he had it, but we don't see that he was an exceptionally caring boy or compassionate or integrous. His dad just loved him because he was Rachel's son. He gets everything that he wants all the time. And then he kind of hits this wall and he can't seem to make anything happen right. I don't know if you've ever been there, but you get this dream or this promise of something, you get this vision for something, and then nothing seems to work out. In fact, somehow life gets worse in every possible and conceivable way for a while. But even the detours have purpose. Even all the little places that God took Joseph. It would take probably a month and a half to talk about all these different things and all these amazing things that God brings out of Joseph during each one of these experiences and how he refines him through it. But every detour had a purpose. And so here's the thing. Sometimes we think we're getting further from the dream, from the goal. We turn around and we say, I'm actually further away than I was before. How am I off this way? And yet we're following God and it just doesn't make any sense. I love this. Genesis 45, 3-7. This is after Joseph is talking to his brothers, and he says, I'm Joseph. This is the big reveal, all right? Is my father still alive? And his brothers were speechless. They were stunned. He's been talking to them all this time, but they haven't known it was him. And then he says, don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. This famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years will last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. That perspective must have kept David And it's nice when you're on the other side. And you'll be like, oh, that's why I felt like my life was being ripped apart for all that time. That was God's plan. Amazing. Thanks, God. That was really fun. I'm glad that you had all that for me. In hindsight, it's great. Oh, this is why I had to go through all that to get here. But at the time, what was Joseph thinking? Like, my father owns everything, and here I'm working as a slave? I mean, think about all the years. That didn't make any sense at all. Thank goodness he didn't get bitter. I mean, honestly, all of history is set up by this story. Stephen, who's one of my favorite characters in the New Testament, in Acts 7, he's got the longest speech in the New Testament. He sets up all the salvation history of all this history of salvation. This is what salvation history means. And he uses these key people to kind of foreshadow Jesus. Like, here's who Jesus was. Look at all these people that kind of showed a tiny glimpse of him. Moses, of course, and he uses Joseph. I love that. He shows Joseph saved all these people because he just was obedient to God. Now, not in the same way Jesus did, obviously, but foreshadowing. Joseph is very aware that this whole thing was much bigger than him and his temporary suffering. His life wasn't his own, so he was saying, God, put me where you need me, I guess. I mean, we don't see those inner thoughts of him, but he must have been. If you need me here, I guess that's where I'll be. If you need me there, I guess that's where I'll go. Oh, I need to suffer for a while? Bummer. Okay. This might be a little bit bigger than just me. So, if I'm the kind of person who always needs things the way that I need them in order to feel like I am following God and everybody's happy with me and everything's working out well and I can't suffer and I can't be uncomfortable and I can't be inconvenient and everything has to be my way, wah. I seriously think God at some point is like, give me somebody else. Just give me someone who's available. This is what the Bible says over and over, powerfully about Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was available. She was like, I'm here. And so he used her. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just uses people that say, okay. And that's what Joseph did. Every detour we get distracted by how far away we are. And then I can just imagine, if you think of God as this master chess player, one day it all comes together. And all the things he's been setting up all over the world to make all these things come right into alignment, because he has a couple of people that he can use who will go anywhere and do anything, it all comes together and everybody goes, oh, that's what he was doing. But if we get distracted by how far we are, because here's the thing. We can be 1,000 miles away and God's God. So he pulls him up. He pulls him from prison to Pharaoh's right-hand person in a second, right? It's not hard for him. He doesn't have to go back and spend 13 more years getting Joseph positioned right. He does it in a day. So we don't have to be distracted by those things. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He can take us from disfavor to favor. He can take us from nothing to everything. He can take us from a servant to a leader. We're really just more of a servant. He can do whatever he wants to do through all those things. And then the third thing we learn is, even when we don't seem to be moving, it should be enough that he's with us. I love this. Genesis 39, when he goes to prison. It says, but the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that had happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. This is a theme in Joseph's life. He comes alongside and he's just like a person there, and then all of a sudden he's like heading it up. The warden had no more worries. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. But you catch that first thing? The Lord was with him and showed him his faithful love. I have a mentor who's always said, it isn't the destination that makes the trip worthwhile, but the company. Really, if we have Jesus by us, who cares where we're going? Now, believe me, strategic, number one, right? So, I kind of care where we're going. I want to dream big. I want there to be someplace, but I've spent a lot of years with nothing to show for anything except loving Jesus. And if that's what it comes down to, where I turn around beside me, I'm like, I don't know where we are, but there's some good company in this car. I have him. He's showing me his faithful love. That must have been enough for Joseph, because he wasn't seeing any kind of fulfillment of any kind of dream at that point. It's not the destination, it's the company. If the dream is our goal, then not having it is going to drive us crazy. We're going to become bitter. We're going to wonder what happened to us. We're going to rail at God and shake our fists. We're going to say, why am I not great yet? I'm 24. I mean, I was there once. I'm just like, because we're servants of Christ and stewards of the kingdom, and he doesn't promise us that. Like, he's worth it. He's worth anything. He's worth being obscure and being hidden and never doing anything much of value other than loving a person or two, right? He's worth that as long as he's with us. And then the last thing we learn is that the fulfillment of the dream is all for his glory anyway. It's really not about Joseph. And I'm sure at 17, when he had that dream, he was like, sweet, I'm going to be somebody awesome. My own mother and father, and believe me, this was a culture that we cannot wrap our heads around. There was no stinking way his mother and father were going to come back. You know, like Eastern culture plus that ancient sort of patriarchal, there's no way that was happening. That's why things like the story of the prodigal son are so powerful when the father like picks up his robe and shows his legs and runs. Men didn't do that who were patriarchs of their family. They were very dignified and respectable, and they didn't do that. That's why these things are powerful. His father and mother are going to bow down. I think if God had fulfilled that dream when he was in that state, before he had changed and been refined, it would have been all about Joseph. But in the end, he's like, this was really all about him saving people. And you know what Joseph couldn't even see yet? He couldn't see that God was also setting up events in history to deliver his people, to have a standoff between him and the Egyptian gods 400 years later, and show the world his power in a way that really he had never done it that huge and that big for the entire world to be able to see a display of God's power, like the plagues and the Red Sea splitting, right? He's setting all this up. Joseph couldn't even see that stuff. He's just like, whoa, lots of people got saved. Cool. He doesn't even see any of that. God knows all of this. It is all for his glory. So who cares? I mean, I care because I want to be a part of it. I don't want to get left behind because all I'm thinking about is myself, or because he's not doing it fast enough, or because he promised me something and wham, I'm not seeing it come to pass. I don't want to be left behind for any of those reasons. I want to be part of it. Give me something big. But I might only be this part of it. Because James 4:4 says, our life is like a vapor. It is like morning fog that's gone after the morning. That's how quick our lives are. That's how fast my life is. It's important to him, but in the context of history, it's not going to be that important, no matter what I do. What's important is that I get to be a part of what he's doing. That's the whole point. That's the point of dreaming. That's the point of having a purpose in life. That's the point of living every kind of kingdom way that we've talked about, is to glorify him, is to let people look at our lives and say, God's good. Right? Not, I'm good. God's good. Glorifying him. So, where do your dreams lead you? I want you to sit and think for a second. What is it that you daydream about? I'm not going to ask you to share out loud, so you can be very, very honest with yourself. A good part of my life, I did daydream about being a hotshot. Still sometimes, when I'm not in a good place. Maybe your dreams are different. I don't know. We're all different. I daydreamed about certain people seeing me or valuing me, or me being in a prominent position in different places, or being seen as a fill in the blank. Some of my daydreams have probably been good. A lot of them have been about me. What do you daydream about? Now, my career is this, basically. So there might be a whole other world for you where you daydream about, being successful in this way, or being lifted up and honored in some sort of, or maybe it's just one person in your life who you just want to say, I love you. I don't know. We all daydream about something. And I want to ask you, is that a dream God has given? Or is that one that we probably need to lay aside to make space? And I want to take some time tonight to really ask God what he has for you. What is the dream? Now, there might be many, believe me, many, many words that he will speak to you over the course of this year. Maybe many words will speak to you this week. I don't know. That's what God does. Sometimes he gives us, he kind of like bombards us with new things to get us moving and pioneering, and sometimes he gives us rest. So it's not always the same. It's not like we all get one word from God a week or something. It's not how it works. But tonight is the first Sunday night of the month. So it is our night to spend time after service praying, which also means there is a delicious treat in the kids' room, which Sarah brought. And in just a moment, we're going to dismiss formally, and you're welcome to go now. I will give you a heads up. Our kids' room moved on us this week. I was gone, then I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Poor Sarah was like, where am I going? I'm in charge here, and I don't know where I'm going. There's a new key and everything. So it is, there's a sign outside the door, and you're going to just have to find your way back, and we'll figure it out next week. But if you are done or you feel like the Lord has released you in just a moment, we're going to sing the doxology. You may be released, but remember, this is not a place tonight for chatting in the back. Move it out into the hallway if you want to chat, or go into the kids' room and take your time there. Grab some coffee or whatever, but be quiet, because tonight we're going to give the Lord some time to speak together. Now, I know we always give him time to speak alone, but corporately it's powerful too. And our leadership will be in here, and you guys, we are family, so if you want to pray for somebody, pray for somebody. If you want to, ask somebody to pray for you, do that. You don't have to be official anything to do that, but our leaders are ready to pray, and Matt's going to come in just a moment and lead us in some music and stuff. But really, it's just a time of meditation where we give God the opportunity. We say, I don't really need to rush out yet. And so I'm gonna sit with my journal and my Bible, and I'm gonna listen with my pen ready. I'm gonna ask the Lord, what are the dreams that you have for me? Is there a word for this year? Is there a theme that he wants to bring back? Is there a picture that he wants to give you? Is there a feeling? I just want you to close your eyes. The idea of the prophetic is literally hearing God and speaking it. And in some instances, not even speaking it, just hearing it. When we talk about those kind of gifts where God downloads something and we speak it or we hear it or we act it out, that is what the prophetic is. It's very, very simple. The prophet hears the words of God. And there are a lot of different ways that he shows that. And even tonight during our prayer, some people had a word, some people had a picture, some people had a feeling. That's how God works and how he speaks. And so I'm going to ask you just to do that, not to rush out. Here's the thing. When we listen to God and we hear him, we need to act on it and we need to share it right away. The only way to make sure we're living it out is to make sure that someone else knows. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. That's what community living means. In the body of Christ, it means someone else knows that God's spoken to me to this. So that if Rochelle says, God spoke this word to me, and I say, okay, it's been 2 months now, and I'm just kind of wondering where that word is, she can say, you're right. I've forgotten. I'm not holding that thing as close in my hand as I was before. So I want to encourage you to stick around and to allow God to speak to you. We're going to do it the same way we did last time. If you want to be left alone and don't want anybody praying for you, believe me, it's not like you're going to offend anybody, then just move to the sides, the edges of the room. But if you're sitting in your seat, somebody might come pray for you. So just be forewarned. That's the best way that I know to do it, other than asking people to come forward. And this is just going to be a time of meditation. So go ahead and come up, Matt. What we're going to do is sing the doxology, and then we're going to ask the Lord, what are you saying to me? And what am I going to do about it? Now, I'll share with you the word that God's spoken to me for this year. Extravagance. Which is weird for me, right? Because I'm not so flowery in the way I think of things, but that's how I know it's God. Receiving extravagantly, which might seem strange, but God's really been speaking to me about that. And giving extravagantly. You know how, have you ever gotten that feeling of oh, wow, God's blessing me so much. Okay, that's enough. That's too much. Anytime that feeling occurs to me, I realize I'm still living in legalism, because somehow I've told myself I'm worthy of 10%, but not that other 50. I'm not worthy of any of it. That's the trick. That's the key. I'm not worthy of any of that stuff. And so to receive as a gift, it's not because I've earned any of it, because I'm never going to be able to earn any of it, but to say, okay, that's really big. You want to give me that? And extravagantly receive. And then extravagantly give. Forgiveness, money, my time, my love, my approval. Those things that I can sometimes withhold from people. God has just spoken that to me. Extravagance, Leila. Your faith, gifts, supernatural. Give it away. Be extravagant with it. So that's just an idea of something the Lord might speak to you. Something like that, a word or a picture. I would love to hear about it if you want to share about it later this week. But we're going to give God some time to kind of speak to you. And if you want prayer, I will be here. All of our leaders will be here. If not, just sit at your seat and pray. Or If you're released, I love you guys. You're awesome. So let's sing the doxology, and then you guys decide what you want to do. It's totally up to you. But we won't do this again for a month, so just a reminder. Stick around if you can. All right. Sorry. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son,